Okay, so for AT1 today, I've decided to focus on an area from phonics from the curriculum to improve on. But first what I want to do is, first I'm going to summarise what we did in years 1 and 2 in literacy. So in teaching reading, this was our introduction to literacy in the classroom and understanding how children engage with literacy. And basically what we focused on were the basic elements of learning literacy and the concept of teachers as readers. So we did a lot of self-reflection on ourselves and our reading habits and our engagement with texts and their relevance to us, and also a large philosophical element on how we as educators need to be able to engage with all kinds of texts across a range of mediums so we can then understand and present those best to children because they might have different preferences and accessibility, so to make sure that we can cater to them. We studied the 4 resource model, which basically highlights the 4 main elements of literary understanding, decoding and making meaning of text, which is quite important to getting the insight of how a mind works, or especially specifically a child's mind in decoding and understanding. We also analysed syntax, semantics and graphophonic cueing systems, which is how children decode and again make meaning of what they are reading. And then the following year in teaching writing, we drew a lot on teachers' roles in modelling reading and writing habits. So teachers need to read and to consistently write for children to then be encouraged to do the same. We followed Donald Graves' philosophy of making writing a meaningful practice to children, so not just having them copy out or writing, completely random stories or texts. We wanted them to have a purpose for it so that they engage better. They're making more connections and learning across the curriculum, also meeting cross-curriculum priorities in that way and having much more enriched learning. We also had an introduction to visual literacy and the relationship between images and words in making sense of text, which would be great for children of all sorts, especially those with any kind of learning difficulty or delays or problem or English as a second language, being able to mix the 2 modes and make sense of language that way. In terms of choosing phonics, I specifically chose the strand or the learning intention outlined as children must be able to recognise most letter sound matches, including silent letters, trigraphs, vowel digraphs, and common long vowels, and understand that a sound can be represented by various letter combinations. So I chose specifically to focus on trigraphs, which are 3 letters, 3 specific letters in a row that make a specific sound, such as ing, tch, eau. So that's what I chose. This purely because I could have chosen quite a few of the elements, but mostly this technical aspect because I felt quite comfortable with the philosophy of teaching reading and writing and the meaning of it, but the actual technical practice of helping a child understand how to, if a child had come up to me and said, I don't know how to read at all, where would I start from the beginning? I had no clue. So I wanted to really solidify my technical understanding of teaching literacy and the links between reading and writing and phonics as a concept, and how diverse and how it's applied across classrooms and the different stances I could take with that with different students. So there are a number of phonics systems employed across classrooms, but one of the ones from the reading supported by Hornsby and Wilson is known as basic phonics, and it simply supports the idea that children are taught a simple grapheme in no particular order, or phoneme, sorry, in no particular order, and they make that letter sound relationship and then practice that specific one, that specific phoneme throughout their studies in picture books and in practice and in relevant context as well, so that it's not lost. There's also the use of analogy, which is basically children also being taught a specific phoneme, but this is done in some sort of order and structure where it's been planned for them, so it's not spontaneous. They've been told that they will be learning these sounds this week, and they then take that specific sound and relate it to a word family, which all have that specific phoneme, and it's much more structured and focused in that way. So it's the whole to part, so learning the whole phoneme and then recognizing as a part in different words. One of the reasons I agree with Hornsby and Wilson with teaching basic phonics is that systematic and commercial phonics systems don't really pay much mind to diction or dialect in terms of language, because, as I've already stated, it is making letter sound relationships, so seeing a letter and making that sound. So if children are taught to read and to write by each specific phoneme only, then dialect would mean that the spelling of language would be different across every single area, that there's a different dialect. There'd be no consistency in language, and children would then become confused and be pronouncing words incorrectly and having to relearn their almost rote learning writing and not having a connection to it in the way that they pronounce it at all. So almost like a second language, and it's quite inconsistent and not meaningful and not purposeful enough to children, and that then will affect engagement and also make it much more difficult for teachers. So lastly, I'll quickly go over my weekly plan for the rest of the semester to improve my knowledge in trigraphs and phonemes or phonics. So I hope to complete at least one professional reading per week, hopefully 2 ideally, and visit my local schools and view the phonics programs or systems that they are using. Hopefully they'll be different. I'll be able to compare and contrast. I work in before and after school care as well, so getting the children's opinions on their literacy lessons and what they like and dislike would also be really great insight, and I'll keep record of that. I'd like to plan a couple mini lessons in basic phonics for trigraphs specifically, just to get my head around the practice of that and the process, and so if I have any queries I can then bring them up with my tutor. I'd like to develop also a resource library of books and titles of picture books which effectively model trigraphs. And I'd also like to critically reflect on my progress in my following 2 journal entries with input from my tutor, ideally. Thank you.